Welcome back to another Director's Cut presented by They Said, We Said. I'm your host, John, and today we are here talking about one of the craziest mad scientists in Hollywood. Well, not even Hollywood, more of a Dutchman, but this man is probably one of the most underappreciated and understudied directors of his time. We are talking about the great and wacky Paul Verhoeven, and I couldn't tackle this tall task by myself, so I brought in a full panel. And the first one I would like to introduce is my regular co-host, the man from RADEntertaiment, coming off fresh from Midwest Action Fest, Mr. Tony Walters. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, John, thanks for having me once again. Midwest Action Fest was a lot of fun, and I'm really excited to talk about all these crazy, ridiculous movies that this guy made.
Also returning on the show, the very awesome, the video diary man himself from Classic Flix, Jay Manning, coming off his awesome video, his video diary on Dark City. So thanks for coming back, Jay.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. San Dimas High School football rules.
All right, and our very special guest joining us for the very first time. This man needs no introduction. You guys know and love him. He's from Good Bad Flix, Mr. Cecil Trachenburg. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. And you did not butcher my last name.
Yay. Well, the night is still young, so to speak. So we will, as we've done, this is our third director's spotlight, or director's cut. And the first one we did Ryan Coogler. He only has 3 films, so we covered them all. We did the entire video diary, or the whole shebang on Ryan Coogler, because it was 3 films, is pretty easy. Spielberg was second. We did kind of our top 5 because he has a little bit more extensive catalog than Mr. Ryan Coogler, but Paul Verhoeven's kind of in the middle. So instead of doing a top 5 or just going over every single movie, and we'll still talk about movies like Showgirls because it's Showgirls, but I digress. We're gonna go. We picked our 4 favorites rather, and let's, in chronological order, let's start from 1987's Robocop. So I'm going to give this one to our special guest from Good Bad Flix, Cecil Trachenburg. Tell us a little bit about Robocop.
Robocop, for me, is one of the best movies ever made. I just simply adore it. And I discovered a lot about it over the years, partially because of what I do for a living, but also partially because I just like looking into these sort of things. And I had discovered originally Robocop was supposed to be Judge Dredd. Ed Neumeyer was desperately trying to make a Judge Dredd movie, but he did not own the rights to it. And he was, the story is a little bit muddy because it's been a while since I worked on it, but he was in the studio at the same time as there was another producer who was in the studio who was pitching what he owned as Judge Dredd, what would eventually become the Stallone movie, after a long, 10-year battle of going back and forth and trying to get it made. So ironically, if not for them trying to constantly make that other Judge Dredd movie, we would never have gotten Robocop. We would have gotten an earlier version of Judge Dredd, and who knows how it would have turned out, because Verhoeven wasn't attached at the time. It really was just Neumeyer who was trying to make it happen. So it's really interesting because I think that because of the fact that they couldn't make the movie that they wanted to make, they ended up making something else, which is similar but different and awesome in its own way. I just love the ridiculous satire in it, the over-the-top violence, Verhoeven's just stylistic flair to it, and also Peter Weller, who has become my all-time favorite actor. I just adore the guy. I've seen him in bad movies, but he's never given a bad performance. He's always shined. He's always been great. And I just adore the movie. I even own the X-rated cut of the film because it was originally X-rated for violence. And if you see the R-rated cut is very violent, and then you see the X-rated version, you're like, oh, okay. But it's funny that they rated X-rated for violence, because when you make it so violent, it actually becomes cartoonish. and therefore, in a way, it kind of makes it less violent. But that's me. I'm not the ratings board. But I just simply adore the movie. Everything about it is wonderful. I can't get enough of it.
Absolutely. And Paul Verhoeven is someone that, I mean, he does that. They don't make movies like this anymore, right? It's just so over the top, so shocking. And unless you're watching something like an Eli Roth or, like a Saw or a Green Room, like almost like torture porn, you don't get to see these kind of movies anymore. So Jay, what did you think about RoboCop and Paul Verhoeven's? I don't know, was this his kind of first foray into an action film?
He'd done action before, but this kind of gore is so much of a spectacle that I'll echo what Cecil said. It's so cartoony that you're laughing instead of being grossed out. And Verhoeven loves using that splatter. Just watch any interview he does where I wanted to throw the blood on his face so it became. I do a bad impression, but in 1987, things like a robot police officer, a militarized police force, that was funny back then. It's not funny anymore. We have drones hunting people. We have militarized police forces. Maybe that's why the remake of the movie fell on its face so hard. But he understood satire and just knew how to make the joke stick and how to stick the landing. Because at the end of RoboCop, nobody wins. RoboCop is still owned by the big corporation. They're just going to put a new guy in charge of the thing, and the evil corporation lives on. And you're kind of rooting for the wrong people in a way by the end of a Verhoeven movie.
Absolutely, and that's very on point to another video another movie that he made later on that we're going to talk about. Did the good guys win? Because Paul Verhoeven's kind of known for his over optimistic endings, but they always have this kind of sick little twist in the back of your mind. You're just like, oh, I feel good, but should I? I saw this movie at a very tender age. It came out when I was a wee John, probably way too young, and my parents were immediately upset with the video store for letting me watch it. Tony, we're around the same age. I don't know how old everyone else is, but did you see this movie as a child? I mean, I remember RoboCop toys. They marketed this for children.
Oh yeah, I owned RoboCop toys. I watched RoboCop with my grandpa. My grandpa was a huge action movie buff and still kind of is. So it was kind of like a weekly thing. You always go over to Grandpa's house and watch an action movie. I probably watched all of these movies on this list at my grandparents' house. But this movie, though, especially was one that kind of stuck with me throughout my years. And I watched it probably a few years back for the first time in a while. And I was just kind of shocked at just how violent it was, because as a kid, I guess it never really hit me as being super violent, because the violence is so over the top. That it never really struck me, but rewatching it as an adult, I was like, I can't believe I was allowed to watch this as a kid. But I did watch the X-rated cut of when Murphy is gunned down that first time, and that scene goes on forever. It goes on forever in the R-rated version, and it goes on like forever in the X-rated cut to the point of it is really hilarious. I love this movie, and now though more than anything. Thanks a lot, Cecil. I really want to see a Verhoeven Judge Dredd movie now, really bad.
Right? Yeah. What was it? Yeah, it's just like, and they had that kind of overlying theme of satire. We had those kind of news clippings and stuff like that in the background that Verhoeven loves so much. Just talking quickly before we move on, just some of the most memorable scenes. We'll go back to Cecil.
Well, of course you've got, Dick Jones. I work for Dick Jones. That's just great. You've got RoboCop, giving the middle finger. You've got the guy getting shot in the office. I mean, it's just so many great things. And oh my God, I still love the Ed 209. It's just like a great animatronic, stop motion puppet that it looks awesome. It still works. It still looks good. And it's frustrating because you get some people now, they're like, oh, well, the CG looks so much better, and then you go and you watch the terrible remake, and you're like, look at this. It's everything's cut so quickly you can't tell what's going on, because that way they can kind of minimalize the violence shown, and then everything just is too polished. It looks, they made RoboCop look like a Power Ranger, and that's actually kind of bad mouthing the Power Rangers, because I like the Power Rangers. like it doesn't look right, it doesn't work right, and it flopped as well it should have, and it's just the kind of film that really you can't remake it now, or if you are going to remake it, you can't soften it. You can't make it a PG-13 film, and you can't make it in the style that they did when they did the remake. You need to go balls out. You need to go hard R, and you need to keep the satire intact. That's the only way you can remake it. Otherwise, don't even bother.
Yeah, the violence is so ridiculously, like, you see even action movies of the time, like your Lethal Weapons and everything. You see people get shot, and it's just literally, it looked like their clothes poofed up or something like that. But this, like every Verhoeven movie, as far as the violence goes, you see not only the gunshot wound, you see an exit wound, you see like the skin puffing up around. It's so tactical and so disturbing that you're almost like watching the news.
Oh yeah, and the other, oh god, I can't remember his name, but the guy that gets pushed into the toxic waste vat, and then he comes out, he's help me. That's another like just amazing thing. I saw that like I was way too young, and I was traumatized in a good way, but it was like, oh my god, and then he gets hit by the car and explodes. It's amazing. We don't see that anymore.
One of the things that I always thought was a weird decision in RoboCop was the fact that his face was like pulled over the metal, versus like the new RoboCop where they made it look like the metal was pulled over his face.
Right. Yeah.
Made it look more like a helmet, but like the actual, like, the 87 RoboCop, it was his face is kind of stretched over that metal. That was always an image that stuck with me for pretty much my entire life, because I found it to be extremely odd and very creepy for the hero character to really look so scary. But it works especially now watching as an adult with a different perspective. I feel like it works because he was kind of a monster, like, for even though he was a hero.
He was a Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
RoboCop's got like Frankenstein illusions, Christ metaphor illusions. I mean, he dies in a crucified pose. He walks on water. A lot of Christ imagery in RoboCop.
All right, and let's now we're gonna go to, I believe, 1990 to Total Recall. Is that the next one on the list? I believe so. Yeah, and let's go back to Mr. Tony Walters. Tell us a little bit about Total Recall. I don't think. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'll tell you about Total Recall, even though you told me I was going to tell you about Starship Troopers. It's fine. Total Recall.
I'll do Total Recall. I got two.
No, you're fine. You can take whichever one.
Okay. Whatever, man. Don't make it weird, Tony.
Cool. No, I want to make it weird. Total Recall is awesome. This is probably my favorite out of all these movies. And I just watched Total Recall for the first time like 3 or 4 years ago. Like it was a movie that I'd seen bits and pieces of growing up, but I never really gave it the time of day for some reason. It just kind of always escaped me. But I watched this for the first time just a few years back, and I love this movie. It is a movie that takes so many risks that it blows my mind. Just the fact that it exists blows my mind. I love it so much. I put it like there with like Big Trouble in Little China in a sense of like just these movies that were just so crazy and out there, and they were like rather successful and people were accepting of it. Like, people don't take risks like that, or Hollywood itself doesn't allow filmmakers to take these kind of risks anymore. The remake of this movie is one of the biggest garbage pieces of like trash because it doesn't take any risks at all. It dumbs down the story so much, and you lose all the weird, gross awesomeness that is Total Recall. Like, Mars is one of the coolest places ever, and I love it so much. I love the eyes bursting out of his head when he's like, outside the thing, and like the dude with the baby chest. I forget the character's name.
And that's the hero, right? It's not even like a villain in that. And that's like Nightmare Fuel.
Exactly. And that's Nightmare Fuel, and it's not even the villain. I I don't know. This movie just boggled my mind so much watching it as an adult. I didn't get to experience watching it as a kid.
Jay, what really stuck out about Total Recall? I mean, Verhoeven definitely, and like Cecil said, RoboCop didn't make a lot of money. This was a blockbuster. This had Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. Have you ever heard Arnold Schwarzenegger say "fuck" so much in a movie before? I don't think so. I mean, this was like full on, popcorn, sold as a popcorn movie, and they just like shredded people's brains with how brutal and violent and vulgar it was. Yeah, Jay, what did you think about Total Recall?
I think that entire movie can be summed up in one scene early in the film when he's running from Richter and those guys, where he grabs a totally innocent bystander and uses him as a human shield. And the guy just gets, poor guy just ripped to shreds. And there's no remorse on the part of Schwarzenegger. He just tosses him aside and gets away. And Verhoeven loves to throw the split empathy to your characters. I'm rooting for Schwarzenegger. I want him to get away, but dude, tons of people are dying because of you. You can't seem to get your shit together and get away from this guy. Boy, where do I even go from there? But the one thing I will praise is the makeup and the visual effects, because there's no CGI in the film, and it's all matte paintings, all practical effects, and the mask of the lady that comes off. I mean, you slow it down, you can tell it's a pretty fake looking Arnold head, but you're so in that scene already from the tension and from the effect of the editing and the pacing. I forgot who edited that movie, but it's such a kinetic film. I think it's probably the best edited of any of Verhoeven's movies, because it just goes and it does not stop until the end.
Where does Total Recall kind of fall for you, Cecil, in Paul Verhoeven's catalog?
It's definitely like, it's tough because his movies that are good are great. Total Recall is very high up there. I would be hard pressed to really decide where I'd put it. I guess probably after Starship Troopers and RoboCop. Simply because I really adore those movies, but Total Recall is so good. Like you guys were saying, the practical effects are just bar none some of the best in the business. They were phenomenal. The pacing, the editing, everything is good. The writing is on point. Great lines. If I'm not me, who the hell am I? Just so awesome. And it's a shame. I'll just touch on it briefly, but I was infuriated with the remake because I like Len Wiseman, the director of the remake, but the remake was it was slick, it was polished, everything was too clean.
Yeah.
And in this, it was once things got going, it was gritty, it was dirty, it was like a nasty movie. And with the remake, kind of like the RoboCop remake, everything was just too polished, and it took away any of the edge that the original had. And also the whole going on an elevator to the other side of the planet. I'm like, what? This stinks. And I remember I was mad because they kept saying, as the film was in production, we're following closer to the original short story. We're making it more like that. And I'm like, okay, you know what? That's a way, if you're going to remake something, do that. Don't just ape what the original did. But then you're watching the remake, and there's lines that are not in the Philip K. Dick short, but they're in the original movie. And I'm like, oh, you just copy pasted, only you made it bad. But going back to the Verhoeven one, it's awesome. I think that everything about it is great. I love Schwarzenegger. I think his deliveries in it. I think Sharon Stone makes for an excellent supporting villain. Michael Ironside, as always, is terrific. Whenever you need a bad guy, you phone him in. Actually, there was a movie not too long ago called Extraterrestrial, where he plays a pot farmer who's like really paranoid, and he's got this little teeny tiny part in it, and he's awesome in like 10 minutes. It's like, I want the movie about him, but he's great. He's great in everything. And
good to see he's still working.
Oh yeah. He's somebody he's a pro, man. He's probably going to keep working until he can't work anymore.
Ironside's one of those actors who can make even the most mediocre dialogue sound epic and awesome. Just pick anything he says. You go to Top Gun with some of the most mediocre dialogue, and he just nails it.
And talking about Sharon Stone, I mean, she went on to star in his next film, and her and Verhoeven have a very storied past, very tumultuous relationship, especially with, I guess what she claimed he kind of put her through making the next film that we're going to talk about. But at the time, Sharon Stone, if I recall, she wasn't really a household name. So this was kind of one of her bigger breaks.
Yeah, Basic Instinct ended up like making her career. Like nobody really knew who she was until she uncrossed her legs,
Almost a spit take at 10 in the morning.
Almost.
Almost. Oh yeah, but it was well, she even said like she didn't want to do it, that's what she originally said. But Verhoeven is so off the cuff and so blatantly honest to a fault, where he's just like, no, I picked her because she was a bitch and she'll do, she wanted to do it, and I had other actresses that wanted to be in the role, but I didn't think that they were mean enough, and this, that, and the other thing, and he even went on to say, Michael Douglas didn't even want Sharon Stone involved, but he's just like, but she's going to go all the way and really give the best performance. I might as well, we're already segueing into the next movie, which is Basic Instinct. So Jay, why don't you tell us a little bit about the movie, that the kind of the shift in tone. We have a bunch of action movies, at least in these four, which he does so well, and especially action sci-fi, but this is a little bit of a shift in tone with a thriller in Basic Instinct.
Oh, I love this movie. I would even put it more in a black comedy genre than thriller. And Verhoeven knows how to mix genres. He knows how to bring slapstick comedy into hard R sci-fi movies. And it's the same here. Basic Instinct makes fun of every trashy pulp detective novel that just, it makes fun of all that airport literature of, all it needs is like the noir type narration of like, she had legs that went all the way up, because he knows how to make his visuals so strong you don't need any of that stuff. And touching on Sharon Stone a bit, her performance in that movie is the most grounded of the entire cast. Everyone else is chewing up the scenery, and she's the total straight man. Like, I'd have to be pretty stupid to kill someone the way I did in my book, wouldn't I? And you end up rooting for Nick, the cop, the corrupt cop who killed a kid or killed someone.
The tourist.
And he's a drunk and he's a womanizer, and he's your absolute anti-hero, and you want him to win. And then in the end, when it turns out, oh, he's not going to win, she's probably going to kill him like any second. Verhoeven always ripcords you back through the entire movie, and all your assumptions you had about the character were wrong. That comes from really good writing. So when I saw reviews, when I was researching this, of when Basic Instinct first came out, they just called it just tawdry, awful writing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is some really smart, bad dialogue. I mean, everybody is just chewing every piece of scenery in those like extreme close-ups. Verhoeven loves people with exaggerated facial features, and he loves to put them in these like fisheye lens, like when what's his name, Newman from Seinfeld, he gets like right into the camera, like, did you have sex with him?
See every drop of sweat. Yeah,
like, hello, Newman. All right. But he knows how to just make tension palpable in that, and then at the end of it, if he's done his job right, you're laughing at a lot of these scenes, especially like when Michael Douglas is in the club trying to be all cool, like dancing up against like all these goth lesbians. He stands out like a sore thumb in his dad's sweater. And Verhoeven's the king of putting gratuitous violence, and this is gratuitous sex left and right. There's not an obligatory tit shot that's not just perfectly planned down to each individual shot. And like Sharon Stone gives these incredible looks. She doesn't have to say anything. She's just got that face, that she has that twinkle that great movie stars do. I think it's an underrated performance that she gives in that. I could go on all day, but the sun's going to set soon.
And Tony, you just came off of watching this again to prep for it. And real quick, before I ask your thoughts on it, coming from a fresh set of eyes on it, this movie this I want to say that one of the biggest characters in this film is the score, because like Jay said, it's such a like a trashy film, or it's such a like a trashy novel, like a romance novel, and I think that the score was composed so perfectly to match that mood, because it's almost distracting at certain times. When I was watching it again the other day, it like the score swells so high at certain times and tells you what to feel, or you know, he's just walking in the car and it's like bum 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 bum, you know, it's just like all these crazy beats that the score is kind of taking you along, and it's its own character. Do you guys think that was on purpose?
Oh, for sure. I think it was definitely on purpose. I think that the score, like, I think it plays into the what you're saying about, you know, that's kind of like has this trashy feel about it, and I think it just like amplifies that. You know, when I said earlier that I watched a bunch of movies with my grandparents growing up, or like my grandpa specifically, this is one of those movies. But when I was a kid, the rule was just close your eyes. And I just remember closing my eyes through like all this movie. So I don't have a very good memory of this movie. So I had to rewatch it, and it was very much like watching it for the first time. It was just a movie that was always hidden. Like I wasn't supposed to watch that movie growing up. So I was like, all right, let's watch this movie. And the whole time I was watching it, one of the things that I kept thinking about was, this should be 50 Shades of Grey. Like this movie that people keep talking about that is like apparently not as good as the book. I haven't read the book. I don't care. I haven't seen the movies, but like when I was watching, I was like, this should be it, right? This should be what people are going to the theater to see. Just re-release this movie and people can go get their fix this way. But I really did enjoy it. It was a movie that because it was like kind of forbidden for me to watch, I eventually just didn't care to watch it. And I was like, I don't even know if this really interests me, but I'm a huge fan of crime and noir and just these kinds of thrillers. So I was actually really enthralled throughout the whole movie, and I was surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, and it's a film that, like you guys stated, Verhoeven, his violence is violent and visceral, and his sex is brutal and ugly and dangerous. And you know, like Tony perfectly said about 50 Shades of Grey, that is your, you know, nowadays basic instincts are in millennials. And then you get you know, even the horror movies don't have blood in them anymore unless you really go into that weird torture porn realm. And that's why people like Verhoeven, I mean, Verhoeven's 79 at this point, so I don't know how many films he has left in him, but you know, he just released Elle back in 2016, especially not in the States though. Although he wants to, I don't know how much he has in him left. Do you think, Cecil, I'm going to ask you, do you think that there is that this kind of filmmaking rather is kind of dead at this point, or do you think we'll see kind of a resurgence in this kind of stuff?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, I think that it's dead in the eyes of the studio. Because Spielberg actually he got roasted over the coals for it, but he had a lot of valid points. He said the medium budget film is dead. And medium budget being at this point of the game, you're getting anywhere, you know, anything under $100 million. But Hollywood cannot sustain itself by constantly putting out, you know, $300-400 million films. It's just it's counterproductive, and eventually you're going to reach that point where it's all diminishing returns. If your film doesn't make $2 billion, then you lose out. It's ridiculous. And meanwhile, we're getting films that are smaller and are you know, killing it at the box office. Get Out. That A Quiet Place just made a ton of money, and I think that cost like $15 million to make. But I think that a lot of the movies that are more story based, that have a lot of stronger focus on the writing as opposed to these big CGI spectacles, are where a lot of that is lost in. So I think that Verhoeven, and we're going to get into it in his next film, you can see what he was able to do with not a huge budget. Starship Troopers was a $70 million film. And for what he was able to do with practical mixing in CGI and surrounding himself with very talented people, that's how you get the job done for not $300 million. Like, you compare something like Starship Troopers versus something like Oz the Great and Powerful, and look at which one's going to hold up better, and which one costs $70 million versus which one costs $350 million. So I think that the Hollywood system needs to really look at what they're doing, or they're going to price themselves out of business. It's not sustainable in this format. And just actually to touch on Basic Instinct, since I spent all that time not talking about it, I also really enjoy it. It is one of my lesser favorites of his, but it's not like, but that's like almost like saying, which one of your children don't you like? You know, it's like, it's still,
I can tell you, I can answer that.
You can, it's a movie that's really good, and I really, really enjoy it, but it's up against some of the greatest movies ever made. And I enjoy it. I think it's a great film. I just don't think it is as strong. It's still very strong. It's just not as strong as his other films. It feels like a really a higher budget softcore film, which is exactly what he was going for. I mean, all he needed was a few more guitar solos and maybe some saxophone, and that might have really pushed it through.
Wow.
But even that opening scene, man, does it set a tone. And the one thing that I don't really care for as far as Verhoeven movies goes is his opening credits, because it's really just watching credits with like a little tiny like graphic going on.
I think that's a lot of credits from that era.
Sure.
There's a lot of movies that are like that just drive me insane. I'm like, why does it take like 10 minutes to start this movie?
You ever seen the original Superman? The credits are so long, I think I'm still watching them.
Nice. Yeah, but that opening scene of the initial ice pick on Johnny, whatever I forgot his name, Johnny
Boz.
Johnny Boz, that's it. And just, you got to like where every other director would have, just kept on her kind of jabbing it, and it kind of reminded me of Gone Girl a little bit. If I don't want to spoil anything if present company hasn't seen it, but that opening scene with Johnny Boz eating it just,
I got the same vibe, John.
Oh, yeah.
I know what scene you're talking about from Gone Girl. I got the exact same thing in my brain. That's exactly what I thought.
That's why we do a show together.
But you see that ice pick go into his face.
Yes!
That's in the unrated cut, because there's an unrated cut of Basic Instinct.
Okay, then that's what I watched.
That's what I watched. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, I'm still watching Total Recall, because it's like, it's all like sexy and oh my God, she's a perfect body, this woman. And it's not like I said, when most things would flash away and it just show her face or not her face, her hair covering her face. It just shows the ice pick go through his eyeball. And I'm like, oh my God, like, who is this movie for?
That's a buzzkill.
Yeah.
It's a buzzkill. Oh, oof, pew. All right. We're up against it a little bit as far as time, so let's jump into kind of the main event, what all the kids came for, right? Starship Troopers. This when did this come out? 2007?
97.
97? It's that old?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
I started working in a movie theater the weekend this came out. No one came to see it. I saw it in an empty movie theater by myself back then.
Anybody that's interested, and I want to, I'm going to spend very little time because I know you guys all have a lot to say about it, but in my opinion, every single like person that's interested in film should watch this every decade of their life. They should, because it's enjoyable. It has that, lunchbox little kid kind of, action figure vibe to it, because, on one level, it's fun to watch the colonial Marines kill the aliens. And then on another level, it's, this kind of love story, this love triangle. And on another level, it is satirical fascism. So this movie is literally everything. So we'll just kind of go down the line. Cecil, I'll punt it to you.
I adore Starship Troopers. It is one of my all-time favorite movies, even more so than RoboCop. the satire, the visual effects, the whole theme, the very obvious sort of fascism that's going on in the film. I mean, it's just it's amazing, and I love it. The humor is on point. It's I was kind of bummed a couple years ago. Riff Tracks did it. And I love riff tracks. Growing up with Mystery Science Theater, they're awesome. But I think like it was, and they even argued. They're like, everybody's saying it's satire, and we don't think so. And it's like, come on, guys, like you're smarter than this. Like you can't not see the
Nazis.
You can't not see the Nazis.
They're wearing Nazi uniforms. I mean,
yeah, they were.
Clear as day.
Dookie Howser is all in black for like, crying out loud. It's just amazing. It's a movie that I loved from the second I saw it, and I actually saw it in a packed theater. But I know it didn't do anywhere near as well as it should have. And I have spent, the better of my years just constantly crowing about how great this is. And I've acquired some props from the movie. I got after the movie wrapped, they gave everyone who was a crew member, they gave them these posters that were specifically for them that they created. I managed to get one from somebody who was on the crew for the film. Just little things here and there that just anything I can to how much I love this. I got a picture with the main cast that's signed. Anything I can to get a piece of that film. I adore it. I actually had I had the money, I would have bought. They were selling one of the ships that was used on the film, and I unfortunately could not afford it. It was a few $1,000s more than I was willing to spend. But one day I will.
Oh, all right, Jay, pick it up.
I can't say enough good things about how this movie makes fun of fascism, which is ironic because the book that it's based on, the Robert Heinlein book, is actually kind of pro-fascist. And Verhoeven did not like the message of the book, but he liked the idea of it. So he basically turned this movie into a giant roast of fascism, more specifically people who are complacent in fascism. Like Johnny's parents are fascist apologists.
Mm-hmm.
I said this in my review, that the home that they live in is transparent. It's glass. So they don't care about Big Brother looking in on them. I'm going to be a civilian. I'm going to do my civilian shit. And my kid's going to be a civilian. And when Johnny more or less rebels against his parents and taking on this deformed fascist idealism, it really teaches them the ultimate life lesson. Because if you look, all the people who believe in the fascist policies, they're all physically deformed, reflecting their deformed ideologies. Rat Jack, the blind teacher, every single colonial marine you see is missing a limb or scarred up in some way. Johnny's character got lambasted in the reviews. He's just this idiot kid, and you don't learn anything about him. That's just not true. Johnny's gullible, and he's very gullible to a fault, and he goes on this tragic voyage for love. He loves what's her name, Carmen, and joins this horrific war. The movie also gives you a nice look into the sense of false equality. I mean, the people are all serving co-ed and showering co-ed, but if you listen to what they're talking about how they're being oppressed. I can't have a kid. I got to get a license. I can't go to college. My dad said it'll cost an arm and a leg, so I'll join the Marines, give them an actual arm and a leg, and then I'll go to college. Every scene has a great message. I could go on for days. I love it, and the music is kick-ass too.
And it's a visual orgy, basically. I mean, it's so fun to look at, and which holds up. Tony, round us out.
I don't think I can say anything that hasn't really been said. This is probably the movie I've seen the most out of all of his films. I love this movie. It's a movie that I like since it came out. I mean, I've seen it, I don't know how many times. I watch it at least once a year. I love this movie. I think that it still holds up extremely well. I think the effects still work. It's a movie that's, it's sexy and it's violent and it's sci-fi, and it just I don't know, it just hit me right at the perfect age of just God, this like it really loved it. But I'm looking at the numbers. I never realized how big of a bomb it was. Looking at the box office mojo, it is domestic gross of 54 million, and its budget was 105. Total worldwide, though, it did make 121 million, but that's
I guess the
with
movie
marketing
took
and
such
everything
a
else.
bath. The movie took such a bath with the studio that they had to reuse props. Like if you watch Firefly, there's Starship Troopers props all over Firefly because they had to do something with all the stuff they bought.
Now you get another excuse to rewatch Firefly for the third time.
Well, that was the thing. It was all, it was so much practical. I mean, there was CG in there, but it was used very effectively, kind of like Jurassic Park, where you had a mixture of the animatronic dinosaurs and then the CG dinosaurs. In this, you had the aliens that were, some were CG, some were practical. A lot of times the ones that were closer up, that were interacting with people, were the practical ones, and then the ones in the background were CG. But there's a lot of really amazing videos out there that show stuff that you're like, oh, there's no way they could have done that. That was CG. And then you look and you're like, no way, that was practical. No wonder it looks so good. And it's just amazing to me that, this is something that I harp on all the time, but you look at CGI in 1997 and it's like really amazing. And then you look at it now and it's so shoddy, and it's like it should be incredible at this point, but now every CG shot just sticks out like a sore thumb. And back then there was such a good blending of the two that you couldn't really tell what was what. And Starship Troopers, just they nailed everything about it. Is phenomenal. And I think that it is an absolute tragedy that it did as poorly as it did. And the thing was, I think Box Office Mojo, it said 110. I think it was 70 million for the budget, and then they spent like 30 or 40 million in marketing. And because the marketing for that the marketing machine was just ridiculous. And for whatever reason, people just decided that this was not the movie that they wanted to go to, whether the critics were just bashing it because they didn't quite understand it. Although now a lot of critics have kind of come back around on it and have said, oh, well, this is really a brilliant satire, and have finally acknowledged the movie for what it is, as opposed to what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and Tony, you and I talk about this all the time with especially the the MCU films, how everything is so bright. Post Guardians of the Galaxy, everything looks like a Final Fantasy video game now, and everything does seem almost and I guess this is kind of more my take on it, but everything seems so fantastical that it just looks out of place. Where this was so grounded, and like you said, Cecil, the practical effects, the close up on the brain bug, again, like I was saying with Basic Instinct, where normal movies would pan away when you're seeing the hard stuff. When that brain bug bashes into that dude's brain and sucks it out like a boba drink, it's insane that they showed these kind of things to an audience, and it's just so unfortunate that people aren't allowed to have the same balls in making films like this anymore.
It's weird that one of the things that stuck with me, like since the very first time I watched it, was when the guy gets shot accidentally on the in the training mission. Like that was like one of the things in me that went like gun safety. Like I seriously as a kid was just like, and remember that, like remember gun safety. And because at the time it was a thing, we would go hunting and my dad taught me how to shoot a gun and all that stuff. But it was like that movie was like impactful, like because you saw the violence. Like nowadays you don't see the violence, you just see guns go off like that, like the ending of The Dark Knight Rises, where it's just like the cops and the bad guys in the streets, and there's just all the guns and all the cops just fall to the ground, like there's no blood or nothing. It's like, yeah.
Absolutely.
That was a gruesome shot. It's like a watermelon exploded, and it was, it's one of those shots where when I was younger I would like frame by frame go through it to see how they did it, and if you look, you can tell the one cut, the head just goes boom. Really, really great practical effects, nice and bloody.
Yeah, it's so crazy because Verhoeven has a good way to lull you into a false sense of security, because we're having just a normal scene of people walking around talking, or kind of almost borderline cheesy dialogue sometimes, and then someone's head explodes, or someone gets shot, or a bug comes and rips them to pieces, or one of the bugs come and sets the guy on fire. It's so there's such tonal shifts that usually I'm not the biggest fan of, but he pulls it off so brilliantly when you're just walking around having a normal, almost teen movie conversation, and then someone's face is getting ripped off. So, but that's kind of all the time we have to discuss. I mean, obviously we could go on for a while. This man is incredibly underrated. And not there's a lot of stuff that I would like to say, like his long. He is also a person that does the long takes very well, the one shots, but it's not flashy or kind of show offy at all. But yeah, I mean, we could go on forever. It's very unfortunate that 79 years old. I don't know how much he has left in the tank, and it's unfortunate that he didn't really get the kind of the due he deserved. He's an Academy Award nominated director for Turkish Delight, for shit's sake. So I mean, he was all over the place. But yeah, that is our show. So I just want to thank the panel for coming on here for this episode of Director's Cut for Paul Verhoeven. Let's go around the chain. First off, Mr. Jay Manning from Classic Flix, coming off that awesome video for Dark City. Where can everyone find you?
Oh, just look up Classic Flix on YouTube. I'll be one of the 2 channels, I guess, named Classic Flix. There's another one from years and years ago, but that's not me. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. Mr. Tony Walters, as always, it's been a pleasure. RADEntertaiment, Midwest Action Fest. Thanks for joining us again, sir. Where can everyone find you?
Thanks for having me again, John. You can find us at RADEntertain on Facebook and Twitter, Instagram. You can also find us at youtube.com/RADEntertainment.
Perfect. And this is going to be the third attempt at your last name, Mr. Cecil Trachenburg from Good Bad Flix. Thank you so much for joining us, being our very special guest, talking Paul Verhoeven. Where can everyone find you, sir?
Thank you. I appreciate it. And you got it right the third time, too. Before I just want to mention real quick, because we didn't get to it, Hollow Man was a movie that he did after Starship Troopers, and because Starship Troopers was such a bomb, the studio was paying more attention to him, and they made him water the film down. They took a lot of scenes out, they removed the rape scene, and they made the film much less impactful, and consequently, because of that, the movie didn't really hit as hard as it should, and that also ended up being a bomb. And he was so frustrated with the new state of Hollywood at the time, which is why he went back to his home country and started, making movies there, and gave the middle finger to Hollywood. So it's kind of a bummer that because of that, because Hollow Man, it's still a really good movie. That was once again revolutionary visual effects. He made a horror film out of The Invisible Man. And a terrific performance by Kevin Bacon. But it just it got butchered by the studio, as tends to happen quite a bit. So anyway, but if you want to find me talking about movies and whatnot, you can find me at Good Bad Flix on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook.
Awesome. Thank you everyone again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. I will be kind of letting it known which director will be spotlighting next for our next episode of Director's Cut. So thanks, guys.
Would you like to know more?